Hello and welcome to CDO Magazine interview series. I am Davie Cochrane, the San Francisco partner at LiveWell Capital, and I'm really excited today to have Satyen Sangani, the CEO and co-founder of Alation. So thank you very much for joining us, Satyen.
Hey, David, great to be here.
So what other challenges do you think that enterprises are facing today, specifically with regards to effectively leveraging their data?
Yeah, I think that, it's funny. If you look at the world of data and data management tools, you have seen an extraordinary amount of growth led by companies like Snowflake and Databricks, who happen to be investors in Alation. But before that, you even saw the trend of big data with companies in the era of Hadoop, like Cloudera and MapR. And, certainly those technologies have gone by the wayside, but the secular trend over the last decade has been, and actually, frankly, 2 decades has been really massive. And there's a lot of data out there. And you would think in that world that maybe we're reaching some sort of plateau. But it's interesting that the rate limiting step now is no longer compute or storage of the data, which you can get in a pretty elastic way using all these cloud data sources. But it's actually rather the human competency around understanding and managing data. Like getting people to be numerate and getting people to understand statistics and getting people to understand how to use these technologies feels like the rate limiting step. If you look at the number of open data science jobs, if you look at the growth in data science jobs, if you look at the growth of roles that mention data analytics as a part of their purview, almost every knowledge worker or every knowledge job has to use data. And yet, here we are in a world where we've got all this data, and it would seem like the thing you want to do is organize it and control it and put it under wraps. But the thing that we really have to do is open it up and make it more comprehensible to more people. And so I think the biggest challenges are not so much on the technological side. Those challenges are massive and big, and organizing data is still a really big problem. But I think the unseen challenge is how do you get more people to use this stuff so people can have more power to make better decisions and to use their, intellect in order to be able to make better choices for themselves and their companies.
That makes a lot of sense. So as these challenges evolve, how does Alation need to evolve to better support your customers?
Yeah, I think that, we're at given the scale of these problems, right? Literally, 7 billion people in humanity, and probably only, if we're being really optimistic about it, 100 million of them using data on a regular basis. If that's what the math looks like, right, then we're at the very, very, very earliest stages of the market. And I think it is an incredible opportunity to get more of humanity to be able to use data. But that means that in the sum, we've got to make data a lot easier to use. And though we've been at this company and building this company for 10 years, there's still a ton of work to be able to make the data experience, the data consumption experience, simpler for people. Now, to make it simpler, you've got to solve a whole bunch of technical problems that would allow you to crawl data sources faster, connect to them much more easily. You'd have to also solve problems around describing data, which can be both, empowering humans to basically add descriptions just like you would on an Amazon page where people who have bought a product can put reviews on the page, but also through machine learning techniques where you can say people who use this data also use this other data, and just like you might recommend products. And so all of those things that one does in the consumer world to recommend products are totally applicable to the world of data. And there's a lot more AI, ML, engagement, adoption work that needs to be brought to bear. And I think that's really exciting because we've spent the last 10 years doing the plumbing, but now we can start to build really robust apps on top of this core capability that we've built. So that's one part of it. And then I think the other part of it is just making it simpler to use, right? Like, how do you take something as complicated as a SQL query and make it comprehensible to somebody who's never read a line of code in their life? That seems like a tough problem, but I don't think it's an intractable one. And there's a lot that we're doing in order to make SQL as easy to read and easy to use as English. And you're going to see that more and more over time. And it's going to enable a lot larger audience of people to use data more regularly.
Got it. Okay. And so bringing in a question towards the CDOs out there, what trends do you foresee emerging in the next year that they need to be aware of?
Yeah. So I think it's, you'd have to be living in a pretty small box to ignore how much, I think, in general, constraints and I think downsizing that's going to happen in IT budgets in general. And interestingly, when I talk to CDOs, they tell me a couple of things. They say, look, we've got to prove ROI to the business out of our data investments. And we're also on a tool consolidation journey because, we've sort of been buying tools writ large, uh, like drunken sailors as a company. And, it is definitely the case that we don't need 7 tools to manage our data, visualize our data, store our data, compute our data, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a lot of work I think that's happening both to be able to demonstrate real world value and then to also make sure that we are rationalizing our technology architectures. And I think those are really the 2 trends that are going to hit over the next 12 to 18 months as people have more constrained budgets, but also need to be able to reliably demonstrate why they're spending money on these tools and how they're getting a return. And so what I would expect, and certainly what I would, when I speak to CDOs, which I do pretty often in the job, is to really focus on measurement of these initiatives and to focus on how one thinks about return and to align those measures with the people who are funding you, that being your end business audience, the functional business users that are benefiting from the data to make decisions, but also certainly, audiences like the CFO and the CIO who are both responsible for managing the IT infrastructure, but also ensuring return out of technology investments. And then I think, certainly in the tool rationalization world, there's a lot that can be done there. And we're having those constant conversations constantly and, finding that we're replacing in some cases 3, 4, or 5 tools that may have previously existed in this space, which I think is obviously really exciting because it means that people are seeing Alation as the technology of choice, which is pretty cool.
Fantastic. Well, just to throw out one last question, for our viewers, are there any questions or any topics that you want to share before we wrap this up that you think they might find insightful as it relates to Alation and what you all are doing?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would advise to, when I speak with my clients, often people want to manage their data and they want to get to a place where they've got full and complete control of their data. And the folks that are earliest on in the journey, we've done studies on this, and it's interesting. There's this Dunning-Kruger effect where people feel like the journey is going to be a lot easier and feel like they're a lot better at managing the data the earlier they are in their life cycle. And so I think first and foremost, I think it's a really big thing to manage your data. And there's a lot of different directions you can go in. You can start with master data management or data quality or data governance or even something like data privacy if you have regulations that address you. And those are all worthy ideas. I think the thing that I most often though recommend to our customers is to solve strategic problems in a tactical way, which is to not try to overarchingly solve every problem in data management really quickly, but rather to pick off 1, 2, or at most 3 projects that you can make demonstrable success on the roadmap to building larger capabilities over time. And I think that approach is even more important in a world where you've got such constraint on budgets. And so really try to focus on the top 1, 2, or 3 problems, and then figure out the technology and the procedural changes that need to happen from there. And much more critically, figure out the metrics on how you're going to measure those initiatives and investments upfront so that you can demonstrate return on the back end. Because if in 12 months you aren't able to show a demonstrable set of progress that moves the financials of the company, you're likely to suffer from the fate that many CDOs have suffered under, which is sort of the 18-month cycle in, cycle out of the job, which obviously nobody wants.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Satyen, for joining me today. And for all the viewers, please visit cdomagazine.tech for any additional interviews.
Great speaking with you, Davie. Thank you for the
Likewise.
time.